Hi, this is Nick Plizzi from The Sacred Science, and I'm really excited about today's talk with Dennis McKenna. Many of you already know Dennis from the pioneering work he did in the Amazon with his brother Terrence McKenna back in the 1970s. This is detailed in his recent book, The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss. He is a leading ethnopharmacologist and an authority on plant chemistry. It's an honor to be here with you today, Dennis. How are you?
I'm very well, Nick. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you and Maylene so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this.
You know, it's amazing. For the last, I don't know, I'd say 10 years, it's been kind of not to over exaggerate, but it's been kind of like a dream of mine to have a conversation with you one-on-one like this. A lot of what you've done, the work you've done inspired us to create The Sacred Science to begin with. So, really, really honored and just grateful, for everything that you've contributed to the world of plant medicine and spirituality, and bringing science into the picture in a way that really complements all the work that that we're doing down in the jungle and with native cultures around the world. So, I think where I'd love to start, a lot of people know your work who are listening to this right now, but a lot of people may need a little bit of background, and I wanted to know if you could explain to our audience what ethnopharmacology is, and what your work in it, what you do with it.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's easy. There's a kind of a tortured, meaning long definition of ethnopharmacology, but it kind of makes sense as you unpack it. So people say, what is ethnopharmacology? Well, it's the study of medicinal plants used in traditional cultures, right? But not really. It's more than that. It's in the formal definition, which I didn't come up with, but I like it. It's the interdisciplinary scientific investigation of biologically active substances used or observed by humans in traditional cultures.
Wow.
It's a many-part definition, but they're all important in the sense that it's not confined to plants, right? Fungi, animals, all kinds of things in nature contain biologically active substances that are useful. It's not confined to things that we might ingest or psychoactives or whatever, because something like arrow poisons, for example, would be legitimate subject for ethnopharmacology, or looking at, for example, animals' use of medicinal plants, that humans might observe, and there's good evidence that often humans take their cues from watching animals. So it's not confined to things humans ingest. It's not confined to plants. It is used, it may be observed by humans, and also the traditional cultures part is kind of important because it puts a fence around it. In other words, we're looking at traditional or indigenous use pretty much. Otherwise, what we do now and call pharmacology and biomedicine, that's ethnopharmacology too, because we're all monkeys, we're all humans doing this human activity, but we don't usually think of Pfizer and those people doing ethnopharmacology. In some sense, they are in a very broad way. But so that's the reason for that kind of tortured definition.
So ethnopharmacology, there are major pharmaceutical companies that are using the same practices, that have people down in the jungles of the world trying to find plants that are promising for their particular products.
You wish that was true on some level. It's not really that true. It's puzzling to me as a person interested in drug discovery and interested in bridging this gap between traditional practices and modern phytopharmaceutical technology. The drug companies, at least if they have people scouring the jungle looking for new medicines, they don't really talk about it. And in fact, they're not really doing it very much. If they're doing it, they're doing it primarily for PR purposes. They're not really serious about it. Why is that? A few things have contributed to that over time. One is this whole intellectual property thing. pharmaceutical companies or corporations, they have that perspective. Their objective is to be profitable, finding new medicines and healing people and all that. That's a distinctly secondary objective, even though they'll tell you it's the most important thing. No, the most important thing is making money. They don't want to share. They want to own the genetic resources. They want to own the things they might isolate from natural sources and turn into drugs. They don't want to share that with anybody. Certainly not with a bunch of savages, a bunch of indigenous brown people, you know. I mean, why should we share that? So there's a real, you know, it used to be that biopiracy and you know, indigenous intellectual property was not really even acknowledged as an issue. You know, and so they could just come to these cultures and say, tell us all your secrets. Thank you very much. We'll take that knowledge. You may get a check in the mail 20 years down the line. But, you know, they have seen no ethical issue with appropriating knowledge. But now that's changed because, you know, we live in a global world and indigenous people are not stupid, and they understand that this knowledge is valuable now, but you know, there's a new level sort of sophistication because, you know, they can hire their own lawyers and they have, you know, so the indigenous groups have put some blocks in the way of the pharmaceutical industry toward making these discoveries, and it's been a disincentive, which is an unfortunate thing because everybody loses, right? The drug companies say, thank you very much, we won't proceed with this, and a potentially life-saving medicine is not discovered and people are not benefited, you know? So we really need to look for a framework that works for everybody in that respect. And then I think the other factor that's contributed to all this is about, it's 2015, about the end of the 80s, pharmaceutical industry was developing all of these sort of synthetic in-house methods to discover new compounds. All this fancy chemistry, combinatorial chemistry and this sort of thing. And the perception was that they don't need nature. New drugs are not going to come from nature. They're going to come out of vats in laboratories. They'll be made by synthetic chemists. This was a huge miscalculation because nature's always given us the leads for drug discovery. And in the hubris that they had, it was like, we do not need nature anymore. We can think these things up. Well, plants are much better chemists than chemists when it comes to thinking of new structures, right? So these synthetic compounds come through these mass screening approaches and mass synthesis approaches where in a single pot you could take a structural template and make every possible derivative of it that was possible to do under the reaction conditions. Then you would just put them through these different receptor screens mostly. They thought, wow, this is great, but it didn't work. The crisis right now in the pharmaceutical industry is that the drug discovery pipeline is empty, you know, or getting empty. And by empty, to fill the pipeline, I'm talking about drugs that are new discoveries that make it from the field actually into the clinic. New compounds like that are not being discovered. Every year there are fewer and fewer of them. And they're wondering, what are we doing wrong? Well, what you're doing wrong is you abandoned nature back in the day when, and it's true, discovering drugs from natural sources, apart from all the intellectual property issues, but just the sheer challenge of isolating things out of you know, natural sources, purifying them and all that, it's much easier to synthesize things. But if the medicines, if the drugs don't have the activity, then it's not so good. So now, you know, we've gone through about a 20-year cycle where the drug companies are again waking up to the fact that this was a mistake. and now they're trying to reintegrate nature. There's a lot more attention and interest. I don't think they send people out in, teams of people to comb the jungle. In fact, they can't do that now because of the ownership issues. The smart ones are working with people that are already, immersed in that environment, and you get the information by talking to people, traditional healers and so on, who know how to use the plants. But it's complex, but it's not like Pfizer or Merck or all these huge companies have teams of people combing the jungle. And in some ways that's unfortunate, because it gives an incentive to, there are literally trillions of undiscovered drugs, trillions of dollars worth of undiscovered drugs waiting to be discovered in regions of high biodiversity. If there was a concerted effort to do that, it would reflect the true value of the rainforest. But since it's not being done, the assessment of the rainforest and its value, if you just, its value is tremendous, but capitalism tends to look at dollars and cents. And so there's an incentive to undervalue the rainforest. And that's unfortunate. If the environment could be changed so that there's more reciprocity, ideally, I don't know how you would approach it. Ideally, drug companies would gather together to cooperate to create a consortium and set aside X billion dollars, a certain number of billions of dollars, and just say, we'll set aside these environments, we'll protect these environments for the right to bioprospect and go through it. But we'll make sure that Indigenous people are in good shape, the environment's in good shape, their healthcare is taken care of. But that, of course, takes cooperation on a global level, and it's just not a model that works for capitalist predatory companies. So it has to come from, I don't know, the UN possibly could be a framework for this to happen. It's just not happening.